Join the community shaping craft spirits, membership that meets you where you are and grows with you. Visit distilling.com and become part of the movement today.
I'm sort of learning new things constantly. I mean, that's, I'm never, like a lot of folks, I'm never quite satisfied with where I'm at, in my journey as a distiller or whatever. So I found myself as I was getting Iron City off the ground, sort of questioning a lot of things that I thought I knew, or, and I just throughout my career. And and I was learning new things, and I was applying old things in different ways, and just kind of shuffling the deck a little bit, conceptually uh, for my job, and having a lot of fun doing it. But because of that, I would start the book, and then I would sort of, get put off on the side, and then I'd have to put it on the back burner for a bit, and then I'd come back to it sort of refresh, and then I would rewrite a lot of stuff, and it just became this huge undertaking. But it was a lot of fun. And so I think Gail Sands, who formatted the book, told me that it was bigger than both the other books combined. So, um, but that was cool. That was sort of the point, though. So.
Very cool. Uh, so there are a lot of books about whiskey, right? Um, I was Googling some over the weekend, and the list is quite extensive. So I guess, and maybe I missed it, but like, what helped you decide, like, in your process to write this one, and what makes it different from all the other whiskey books out there, without bashing any of the other books?
Oh, no, yeah, no, I would never do that. I think there are a ton of whiskey books out there. Depending on how you define it, there are a ton of books out there just about whiskey. And so the gentleman that wrote the foreword to the book, Lou Bryson, who a lot of people probably already, I mean, he doesn't really need much of an introduction. He's a very well-known writer in the industry, and has written, in my mind, some of the best books on whiskey, particularly from like the consumer side, and helping the consumer make sense of what can be a pretty meandering and intimidating category. Um, and there are a handful of books out there that, there's some, like Bill Owens obviously wrote one of the first ones about making whiskey and things like that years ago. Um, I referenced that very early on. Then you have a couple other textbooks like Whiskey Technology, Production and Marketing. Um, the third edition to that came out just 2 or 3 years ago. I actually have a chapter in that as well. But a lot of these books, I felt like uh, they were textbooks, or they were sort of consumer facing. And those definitely have their place. But I felt like even for the textbooks, it was sort of like, whiskey technology, production, and marketing is a great example, because I absolutely love that book. I recommend it to folks all the time. Um, but at the same time, it's sort of a collection of review articles, is effectively what it is. So you have all these different authors that come in, and they say, okay, for the distillation section, this is what's typically done in Scotland. But you kind of realize that there's not that much in-depth detail into how to actually do something. There's a lot of theory underneath it. And what I really thought was kind of needed was, you could provide a book that gave a lot of the theory, but then followed it up with, well, this is how you approach it. And and I have to be careful when I say that, because I don't really believe in orthodoxy for much of whiskey production. Um, I think it's really easy to get kind of caught in the trap where, well, this is just the way you have to do it, and I don't think that's the case. Um, I like to tell people that I teach tools, not rules. So my idea is to give you just basically a set of tools that you can then put in your distiller's toolbox, and then you go out and say, well, I'm developing a product or I'm trying to fine tune something or whatever, but it's up to you to decide how and how you implement those various tools. Uh, so I think that's what kind of makes it, and it also is coming from, I spoke with a lot of industry folks, a lot of my friends throughout the industry, and not just in the United States, but all over the world. I solicited sort of reviews from people, like, hey, would you look over this chapter? Would you look over this one? I can't remember how many dozens of people I sent this out to all over the world, just different parts of the book before it, because I wanted to make sure that I was as encompassing with the project as I possibly could be. It couldn't just be about, my thoughts, not solely any. So that's kind of how that came about, and the hope is that now I'm sure somebody like next week will publish a book that's far more comprehensive than this, but for right now, the hope is that maybe I've done something that, we'll see.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into it, and it's always great to hear that you seeked advice from outside on what other people thought of it. I mean, that's what makes this community great, is just people collaborating together to help each other succeed. So that's really awesome to hear.
And I would say, like, a lot of thought for me is like a very low bar. So I was just saying. Yeah.
I'm gonna trickle in some questions. We got one earlier, right when we started, when we were going through our technical issues, from Jack. We are having some debates on a pot still, when to end the distillations, stripping spirit runs different.
Yeah, I think I saw that question, and so I'm just gonna pull up the chat here.
Yeah, he's got a second part, like, on a pot still cuts. What are people doing to assist with making cuts more automatic? ABV, temp, volume.
Yeah, so that actually dovetails pretty nicely into another project I'm working on. But the first one, so I always hate giving this answer, but it kind of, the answer to the first one is it kind of depends on the type of still and exactly what you're trying to do. And generally, with pot stills on a stripping run, the end of the run is, once you get under most distillers, not everybody, but most distillers in the whiskey industry, whether it be single malt or bourbon or rye, and they're using pot stills, most of them are turning the still off on a stripping run once the alcohol coming off the still is below 3%. Some go even lower than that. That's typically, we cut ours off at Iron City when we get below 2. Now, when it gets to spirit distillations, we turn the still off once it dips below 10%. There's a lot of reasons for that, but generally, and I've tested this in the lab, once you dip below 10%, the amount of alcohol that's left in the pot is like 0.4%, spent base. So there's not a lot left in there. Sort of following up the follow-up question that he has about how are people, what are the decision factors that people are using. So I'm working right now on, as some people may know, I'm working on my doctorate through Harriet-Watt in Edinburgh right now. It deals with distillation techniques, and I just gave a talk at Beam about this very thing, because we did a survey of distillers all over the world, looking at how they chose to make the cuts on their whiskeys during distillation. And it kind of depends on which cut you're talking about, but we basically identified 6 primary decision factors that people use. Some people use 1, some people use 2, At most, we had people respond that they use maybe 4 out of the 6 to make a choice as to when to cut something. But generally, what you see, whether it's from heads to hearts or hearts to tails, you'll see things like the ABV of the spirit coming off the still. Sensory is a big one for a lot of people, but that's fraught with some challenges, I think, for some folks. The temperature of the vapor hitting the spirit pipe, the amount of volume that you collect at any given point, the amount of time that the distillation is run as well. There's also some other techniques that aren't used as much, but from heads to hearts, you have what's called the demisting test, which is less common here in the United States, but at one point was pretty heavily used in Scotland and in Ireland. Not as many distillers use it these days. And then even I've actually even spoken with people that use gas chromatography to check, which is kind of interesting because that actually takes a fair amount of time. But people have figured out ways to do it. So if you have a GC, you could do that.
Jack, I hope that answered your questions. And just so you know, folks, this is being recorded and we'll post it on YouTube. So like you can always go back and check things on what we're talking about. Clyde Gill said, "I'm feeling unprepared, not having your books yet." Clyde, I posted the link for Matt's book that we have on Amazon. You can go purchase there. You can also get on our website, distilling.com, and under resources, you'll see books. And we have listed all of our books there, and I'm pretty sure they're still listed there. I haven't checked before that came up, but you can always get them through our website. I believe everything's still published.
Yeah, so he's asking about
yeah, one of my focuses is on what water source treatment is being used for the mash and or proofing down.
So they're really talking about two different, with rare exception, you're really talking about two different sources there. I think that, and this is something that I have as folks, a lot of folks know, I have a lot of soapboxes that I like to get on. And one of them is I really hate the way the spirits marketing departments have kind of gone on about water over many decades. And it just always kills me because we talk about how Kentucky and Tennessee and the best distillers down there are all on limestone aquifers and all this stuff. No, they're not. They used to be. There's like 2 in Kentucky that are actually on limestone aquifers, and they're not the thing. Now it's not to say that doesn't have an effect on the spirit. But it doesn't have the effect that the marketers would lead you to believe, which kind of drives me nuts. Water is a very challenging thing. I do have a whole chapter on it in the book, and where I get into calculations and how to look at water quality and how to read a water report and potential adjustments that you might need to make if that's the case. If your water seems out of spec. So the long and short of it is that. For most places, there are definitely some exceptions, but most places have water that will work just fine for whiskey production. And if not, there are ways to sort of ameliorate or otherwise fix the water profile. Now, when you talk about diluting down, say, to go into the barrel or to go into the bottle, now you're getting into, okay, well, how pure is my water really? Because there's some issues there with possible flocculation formation happening in the bottle if you have too much calcium in the water and things like that. So you do have to be careful about those things. So normally I generally recommend to people distilled or reverse osmosis water or something like that. If you live in a very clean sort of rural area where acid rain and things like that isn't much of a concern. I know some distillers will occasionally use rainwater for proofing down. That that can also work, but obviously test the water before you do that. Uh, but yeah, there's a lot to be said about water. It's just the marketing departments aren't saying it.
Good old
So
marketing departments.
yeah, I
I'm a
have one of
marketing
my
guy, so
own.
like I I get it.
Well,
I can laugh at myself.
I control a lot of market, like I direct a lot of marketing at my distillery, and I'm very hands-on with that stuff. And I love my marketing team. They're awesome. Uh, but they also know that I don't put up with bullshit. So I'm like, no, we don't, like let Jim Beam talk about their limestone filtered water that isn't actually limestone filtered. Let them do it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Uh, no
Oh,
offense to anybody from Jim Beam. I actually like the whiskey. It's just, I mean, come on.
it's just reel in your marketing department a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's really,
Uh, Patrick Null asked, "Are you familiar with cut streaming, which is a process used at Port Ellen Distillery on Isle?"
so that I saw that comment. I am actually not familiar with it, though I do know somebody from Diageo that is. So I am going to do some digging on that after this call. Um, one of my mentors was with DCL, Diageo, and he was there for almost 50 years. And he was definitely there when Port Ellen was open the first time around. And he helped get it back off the ground. So I'm going to reach out to him about that. I haven't heard that term. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of curious. See, there's loads of stuff that I don't know. Um, loads.
Patrick's throwing us a curveball. Uh, Alex James asked, I'm starting a small floor malting at my distillery this year and was curious about your thoughts on using green malt as a proportion for the mash bill in whiskey production. Do you see that as viable, or does it risk missing key flavor development from kilning whiskey?
No, I think that's kind of interesting. So one of the things you run into with green malt is having a way to properly mill it. That's the issue with green malt. The best type of mill that you're going to have that you can get for dealing with green malt, I would argue, at least in my experience, is a wet mill. Now, wet mills are not that common. Interestingly, our sister company, Pittsburgh Brewing Company, which is in the building next door to us, they use a wet mill. And they're highly efficient. Basically, wet mills just kind of precondition the malt a little bit. It allows you to mill very efficiently wet grain, very damp grain, without kind of clogging up the mill or anything. There's all sorts of like pros and cons to them, and hygiene is an issue and all these things. But wet mills are really nice. But to the larger question, are you potentially missing some flavors? I don't know if that's really the right question though. Yeah, you might be omitting certain flavors from the kilning process, but you're just replacing them with other flavors. And so I've had some green malt whiskeys before. They're very rare, but I've had them. They're delicious. They are very floral, grassy, herbal, like really interesting whiskeys. I would love to taste more of them. So yeah, no, I think that's the way to think of it. Don't think that you're necessarily missing out or that you know it's not going to be as good. I think there's loads of opportunities out there to do things a little bit differently in lieu of sort of the status quo. Um, and uh, and how about using that for a rye or even floor malting rye? Now, I have not had a green malted rye whiskey. That would be interesting, and I could see that being really a lot of fun. Um, Now I do use floor malted rye for for all of my whiskey. I work with a local maltster, you know, and it's sort of an ethos thing. Like I could easily go with like a much bigger company, but I like working with small local player and actually knowing the guy, and we go out for lunch all the time, and he's a good buddy, and he bought an old like elementary school, an abandoned elementary school, and he turned it into a malting facility, and he floor malts all of our rifles, which is really nice. So,
Randy, I'm gonna get to your question in a second. Um, I did want to ask one of mine before this. You guys keep trickling in. I'm not gonna have a chance to ask any of my questions. uh, in the first chapter, you said the one thing that you want readers to take away from this book is that every decision you make during the whiskey production process affects all the processes that come after that. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? And I ask that because, I mean, the majority of our audience here is distillers, but
mhm.
according to our poll, we have a lot of enthusiasts, suppliers, distillery owners, so they might not be quite aware of what you're getting into there in chapter one. So
I
could you dive into that?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm a bit of a broken record on this line, but I think it never loses its potency in my mind because it's incredibly important. No matter, whatever I write, wherever I give talks, whatever. That is sort of a through line um, that I'm constantly pushing on people. And the thing is that I've heard way too many times throughout my career, and even very early in my career, I thought these kinds of things. Oh, well, the grain I got, I didn't take great care of it. It got a little moldy or whatever. It's fine. I'll use it. I'll fix it in the still, or I'll fix it you know, in the barrel or whatever. No, that's not how it works. That's not. I have learned virtually everything I do the hard way by making. I always tell my team this. I'm like, every mistake you could make, I guarantee you I've made it at least 10 times. Because that's how dumb I can be. But I have learned a lot of stuff the hard way. But the whole thing is that if your raw materials are out of spec or they aren't as high quality as you want, then your mash is not going to be as good. Your fermentation is going to be affected by that mash, and your distillation is going to be affected by that fermentation. And then when you go into the barrel, and I've heard some people say, "Oh, well, my fermentation, it went really long, and I couldn't distill it, and then it got like." I could smell all the ethyl acetate in it and, blah, blah, blah. It's okay. I'll fix it in the still. But as a lot of us know, distillation yeah, you have a little bit of power in selecting what aromas and flavors come over, but distillation is largely an act of concentration. So, the old industry adage is basically garbage in equals concentrated garbage out. And then you might say, well, I can just put it in the barrel and the barrel will fix it. No, it just means you wind up with barrel flavored garbage. So everything does affect everything downstream of it. It's not to say that the things that your process is downstream, you don't have some control over, you do. But, if you mess up somewhere in the process, it becomes really difficult to correct down the line. So, the best offense a lot of ways is a really good defense. So just always being on your toes and just keeping that quality control mindset throughout every step of the process is absolutely key to make sure that you don't have to worry about those things down the line.
Awesome. Randy Sloan asked, given the presumable difference in distillate profile coming off a pot still and the three-chamber still, is Iron City mashing, fermenting, distilling to different proofs and/or maturing whiskeys from those stills differently?
That one's pretty easy. No, we're not actually. We do the exact same recipe for both of them, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, it's just easier, and we are nothing if not fucking lazy. But also, it really what for us what it means is that the only variable at play is that still. Um, and it's been a real treat and a real learning experience over the past few years as we've been running it. Um, but yeah, we use the exact same recipe, everything on both of them. We run bourbon on it, we run rye on it, we've even run single malt on it. No, that was a pain in the ass. Yeah, no, we do a little bit of everything on it. I have some other plans for it in the future too. Heck, we're running it right now. I can hear it in the background.
Matt Reed gave a shout out and said, "Hell yeah, keep supporting those local maltsters from Red
I
Shed
love those
Malting."
guys. Yeah, them's is good people.
Little free publicity right there. Check them out. Priscilla Spall said, as you're walking through all the tools you can leverage in making whiskey, what materials, which part of the process do you think distillers most often underestimate? And where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation? Priscilla, that was actually one of my questions, so thank you for asking it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Yeah, because I remember you sent me sort of like a list of things that you thought might be interesting to talk about. I remember and I was, man, it's a great question. It's a really big one, though. And honestly, I can say that because I've given entire 4-hour lectures on on this very topic. And even that is, I think, somewhat an abridged answer. But yeah, there's loads of stuff that people, and it kind of depends on the distiller. I think there's tons of folks. I think almost every distiller kind of takes certain things for granted, unfortunately. I think that you could argue that almost every step of the process, somebody somewhere is taking it for granted. The grain, thinking that cooking and mashing processes don't really matter that much to flavor. They absolutely do. Fermentation is one I see a lot where people are just like, all right, I have my mash, add yeast, I'm good to go. No problem. That your yeast selection and how you treat that yeast and then how you conduct that fermentation, while it is largely a hands-off thing, has this massive impact on the character of the spirit. It's one of those things that, it always kind of bothers me. I talk about our yeast all the time and some of the stuff that we do with it. And we're working on a really cool project. We just signed a contract on with Lallemand this past week, but we're working on a very cool collaboration with them and our friends of ours, Liberty Pole Spirits, where we're going to go out and harvest some wild yeast in Western PA so that we can come up with a Western PA Monongahela rye strain that we're so there's just tons of stuff that I wish people would pay more attention to. Distillation, I think that's where a lot of distillers, understandably, because I mean that's what we call ourselves, for distillers. So we work with stills, and, that's where everybody seems to put so much of their emphasis. And I'm not saying it's not important. I will say the thing that probably, and I know some distillers that drives them crazy when I say this, but the distillation part of the process of making whiskey, it's not that it's easy, but it is probably the easiest part of the whole process. If you get everything up to the distillation, right, like all the mashing and the fermentation and your raw materials and all the quality control that goes into that, way more difficult than the actual distillation itself. And then the maturation of that distillate, I think, is wildly important, obviously. Now, as far as areas for innovation, I mean, so I actually have like a whole chapter in the book about this, sort of innovation strategies and areas where I think that, so I'll kind of surmise it pretty quickly. I think that a lot of the big players, and I'm friends with a lot of these guys, so like, I'm not trying to say anything bad about them. But I do think, at least at the corporate level, a lot of these guys would love you to believe that basically anything that could be done or could be said in the world of whiskey has been done. Like, and they've seen everything under the sun. I had somebody a friend of mine from Diageo that was like, well, we have an ongoing bet internally say, that says we can't, there's not a single thing that the craft distilling movement can do that we haven't already done in our R&D labs. And I was like, really? I was like, I made whiskey from teff once. And he was like, that's just a different type of starch. That doesn't count. And I was like, okay, so the bar is set pretty high here. Um, I just thought that was like such a crazy statement. I was like, really? Okay. So the truth is, I think at the end of the day, honestly, it's quite it's actually quite the opposite. I think we've really just barely scratched the surface of what's possible in whiskey and what it can say and what it can be. So it's just innovation is hard. It's scary. It takes time. It takes money. These are all things that large companies are not very adept at doing because they have to invest an insane amount of money into making it work. Um, and even then, they have to market it and all these things. And, I could kind of talk about how these companies are not well adapted to the current market environment as it is. That's a whole thing for me right now. But uh, don't let anybody tell you that all that can be done has been done at this point. Um, you know, playing with alternative grains, using unique woods and, kind of bending the rules a little bit. I mean, there's all sorts of things out there. We focus here with Iron City on making historically accurate rye from, pre-prohibition era style rye. I guarantee you, if you look into your own community's whiskey history, there's probably stuff that you could dig up that you would be like, holy shit, yeah, we should be doing that. There's all kinds of things out.
Nice. Jordan Wojtek, you mentioned whiskey technology, production, and marketing book. Are there others in addition to yours which you would recommend for people learning to distill and to run a distillery? So
I
any
don't
other
ever
books out
rec
there you'd recommend?
I
Not
don't ever
yours.
recommend books. No. There are I think that's a great one. I think that what I really put, and this is going to be a little controversial. Um, I think that more distillers should be studying, whiskey distillers, well, and I'll say distillers in general, should be studying spirit categories outside of their own. This is something I encourage my team to do all the time. And so, one of the most influential books for me, um, when I was getting started was were the two books by Hubert Germain Robin, also published by ADI. And those books are incredibly short. The first one is basically the distillation book. And Hubert, if you're not familiar with him, and I know a lot of people are, but just in case you've never heard of him, he is an old cognac distiller. He used to live in California. He came over from France back in the 80s, and he started with Ainsley Cole, the Germain Robin distillery. Um, and and now he's primarily a consultant. He's back in France, but he's a lovely guy, and he knows so much stuff. Um, I really encourage people to read, you know, his book. It's Ian Smiley wrote a book on rum with two other gentlemen that ADI also published. That is also a really great book. Study these other categories. The reason I say this is because, yes, you may not be making rum, you may not be making brandy, but you'd be surprised at how many extra tools and perspectives you get from studying these other categories. And it can be really eye-opening. One of the things, for instance, we run one of the few chamber stills in the world. Well, honestly, understanding how a chamber still operates is kind of challenging. One of the things that made that a little bit easier was understanding rum production on retort stills. It's really complicated to explain why, but I can assure you, understanding the principles of how these other categories are traditionally made will open up completely new perspectives on how you can innovate in your own category, how you can explore different avenues for creating whiskey flavor. I mean, I think that's kind of crucial. Um, I also really advise reading some of the, more consumer facing books. So, anything from Lou Bryson, I regularly recommend, his tasting whiskey book as one of the gold standards. It's a phenomenal book. And it really teaches once you kind of start to learn how to taste and how to approach it from a consumer, you also have a more holistic view of how to approach it as a distiller as well.
The Hugh Bear book, is this the one you were talking about?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Folks, this is like 62 pages. It's a great quick read. Bill actually sent it to me when I joined ADI in
Mm,
2024. Great breakdown, quick of the process, the history. But yeah, that's another one of our books.
it's crazy. It's 62 pages, but you'll learn so much in that
Yeah.
62 pages. Yeah, yeah, I've been fortunate to talk with him quite a few times over the years, and yeah, he's always been really wonderful.
Yes. Not a lot of fluff into it. He
No.
gets straight to it. So uh Terry asked, what are some good bourbon yeast strains and who has them for purchase in small quantities, like for maybe 30 gallons of strained mash?
Okay.
Terry, if
So
he
that's a
doesn't know
good.
anything, I can email you a list of some of our suppliers who could probably help you
Yeah.
out as well.
There's some good ones out there. For 30 gallons, you're not talking a lot here. You're talking, less than 100 grams of yeast. Yeah, maybe about 70 grams. Yeah, 70 to 100 grams of yeast. Uh, Firm Solutions out of Danville, Kentucky is great. You can order just a single 500-gram packet from them. I use their 921 strain, their 048 strain, and in the past I've used their 917 strain as well. I know some other people that have had some good luck with their 927 strain. So there's some really good ones from them. Lallemand also has some really good stuff. You can buy um, single 500-gram packs from them through Scott Labs. Um, and oh gosh, so many of the brewing strains out there will work as well. Though I do caution you for whiskey, what you really want is you want a strain that can ferment some of the higher chain sugars. So, maltotriose is one that you want the yeast strain to be able to ferment. And any whiskey or any yeast supplier should be able to tell you that. If they can't, then find a different yeast supplier. That means they don't know their product very well. But White Labs is great. Omega Yeast is great. White Star. There's quite a few out there.
Nice. Since we just answered one of Terry's, I'll skip ahead. He asked, can you talk about what causes for cloudy distillate?
Oh, cloudy distillate, it depends on exactly what part of the process you're talking about. Um, so cloudy distillate can come from a couple things. Usually what you're seeing is high levels of fatty acids in there. Um, and it might be from a low alcohol level because that's when those things start to come out of solution. Um, that's typically what's causing the problem. But yeah, it really depends. Our chamber still distillate has an insane amount of oil that comes over in it. And so you'll see a little bit of that. But even with that, I mean, the distillate's usually pretty crystal clear.
Yes. Uh, ask one of my questions real quick. I appreciate everybody sending in the Q&A. It's great. So in your book, taking a quick glance at it, me and the team, a lot of science in this book. But you do an amazing job of kind of, rendering it in its own way to make it easily understandable, which people like me can appreciate. Uh, Even if we don't have a academic science background. So how did you approach that? Like what made you sit there and figure out how to put all this down to where it would be easily digestible for people who might not be as experienced?
Um, so much of it comes from so much of it comes from just my personal belief on uh, I came from academia and I'm currently residing once again in academia and academia has a lot of pros to it. It does a lot of good for the world and blah blah blah. One of the problems with academia though is that academics do not know how to um, converse and convey their ideas and their research to the layperson, the people that may actually benefit. Um, and that I've always found kind of frustrating. I think probably every person that's watching this right now could probably pick out at least one, if not 20 textbooks that they've had to study over throughout their scholastic career, whether it was in high school or college or grad or whatever. Um, Textbooks are notoriously dry. And there's sort of this weird, once again, like the word orthodoxy comes to place. There's sort of this weird academic orthodoxy where it's like you have to write in this very dry manner. And nobody has ever given me a good reason for why that has to be. Nobody has ever said to me, well, it gets the ideas across better. No, it doesn't. I make the case that if you are writing in such a dry and just atonal manner and it's so boring and the person falls asleep halfway through, you're not conveying anything. Um, it needs to be entertaining. I mean, and there's nothing that says that it can't be entertaining and also informative. You know what I mean? So that's just always driven me. That's always driven me crazy. Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a way to write where you're not going to piss anybody off. You're not going to offend anybody, but it can still be entertaining, and it can still be factual and informative. Being dry just to be dry, it's a waste of paper.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people do. I struggled through college with that. So uh, thank you for taking that approach to it. Uh, Lee asks, what are the pros and cons of aging in smaller barrels? What proof is best for small barrels?
It's a big question. It's a really good one. I talk about small barrels quite a bit in the book. But the argument for small barrels is that you have this greater surface area to volume ratio, so you get a lot more extractives a lot faster. That is true. There are other chemical reactions that don't really keep the same pace, so that can be a bit of a problem. Um, so I kind of caution people. I've also heard people say that you cannot make good spirits, whiskey, rum, whatever, in small barrels. Um, I think that is total BS. Of course you can. You absolutely can. I've done it, and I know tons of other people that have as well. Um, no, you can make great spirits. You can make phenomenal spirits in small barrels. It just becomes a lot more difficult. You have to think about it a lot harder. Generally, for a smaller barrel, the type of spirit that's best suited for it is a spirit that is very clean. It's been cut very conservatively off the still. Um, that's my argument. I think some like corn distillates don't hold up very well in small barrels, though some people have done phenomenally well with them. But I think rye and and even single malts tend to do pretty well. Wheat whiskey is another one that does pretty well. Uh, but as far as entry proof is concerned, that is actually an ongoing experiment we have right now with Washington State University. We're looking at actually Mackenzie asked that's actually one of the people we're working with, Mackenzie Aragon. But yeah, it's we're doing a project with them looking at what does entry proof really do to the maturation process. We think we know, and I'm not going to get too deep into this because we're still the analysis is still pending, so I can't really say anything. But at least in the short run here and the initial parts of this experiment, it's looking like a lot of the things we thought we knew actually are quite the opposite, and it's been really exciting to kind of work on it. So anyway, I'll leave that one kind of dangling in the wind for the next while.
So I had to jump off. Issue of working at home is I have a dog barking who wants to
Oh
go.
yeah,
So I had
it's
to,
all
I had to
good.
cut out real quick.
No, yeah, I
So
understand.
did you, I might have missed it, but did you dig into Mackenzie's question about how you approach barrel selection? Like
Yeah, no, not yet.
for
Most
both
so that
purchasing and bottling?
Yeah, so that's sort of a larger conceptual thing where you just really need to understand your stocks and your warehouse. There's no easy way to do that except making yourself present. And and for a company like mine where we run very lean, um, I never have enough people. It can be a real challenge, but we're constantly adjusting our strategies and systems so that yeah, we kind of know where certain flavor profiles are developing in the warehouse. Iron City Distilling is still very much, we've been in production for about 3 years now. We'll start to see some of our first ryes hit the shelves later this year. You know, it's still a young project. So even as long as I've been doing this, every project is different. Every warehouse is different. So we're still learning the you know where the flavors are being developed inside the warehouse, which barrels we need to pay close eyes to and close attention to. But you know, a lot of that boils down to I go through and we taste pretty much every single barrel at some point or another in its life cycle, usually several times, so that we know exactly what we're working with. Anything that tastes atypical, anything that is sort of out of spec, gets pushed aside. Out of spec could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Knock on wood, we haven't had that happen, but anything that tastes out of spec, we push aside, with the possibility that that may become like a single barrel, or that might be held back for further maturation, or maybe we finish it in something. Um, Whatever, there's options there that we have.
Uh, so Brian asked if you were starting a new distillery or whiskey brand from scratch today, what would you absolutely do and absolutely avoid knowing what you know now?
Oh, it depends on the project. I said this many times internally over the past few years that if I had known I was going to end up running this distillery, because I was the consultant for Iron City, I didn't know that they were going to offer me the job to run it. Had I known that, I would have designed it completely differently. I basically designed it for anybody but me, and it's fine. Like we worked really well with it. But what I did say internally was that if I had known differently, I actually would have just worked with a chamber still, and that would have been it. It would have driven my guys nuts, the amount of work we have to put into that thing. But it's like it's my favorite still. So. I love it. I love our pot still too, but it's just there's nothing like that chamber still. I mean, I think that the question that I get asked a lot now, and I see getting asked a lot in the industry is, would you start a whiskey brand right now? And to which I say, yeah, I absolutely would. I think right now is a really exciting time to start a whiskey brand. It doesn't mean it's foolproof. I think that there were a lot of people over the past few years that got into the business, um, thinking that they could make a really quick buck and, kind of for the wrong reasons in a way. And it's not an industry for the faint of heart, as so many people on this call will probably attest to. It takes an immense amount of patience and work and intentionality in your process. But also, I think that if you go at it and you say, well, I have this idea about how I want whiskey to be, and you make it personal. I think that I hate the term craft, uh, but I that if I people ask me what my definition of craft is, and I would say that's it. Craft is a very personal thing. Can you draw a line from your intentions to the final product? Is a part of you in that final product? And the truth is that so many of the big guys, no, they can't say that. They cannot legitimately say it. You know, so I think that I think that's a really powerful idea. Um, so if I had, that was one of the big things I think I've really learned and studied over the past few years, um, is that it's not just about the distiller. And you can sit there and you can say, "Oh, I have the best liquid on the planet," and you might, and good for you. I think that's wonderful. But if you are not as a distiller, if you are not as involved with the marketing and the sales and the leadership and the company culture and all these things that go into it, you know, um, the thing that I've learned the most, it's sort of like I was saying with the distilling process itself. Everything affects everything downstream from. Well, a company is effectively an organism. And you have these different departments and everything, but they all need to talk to each other. And there needs to be a common dialogue. And everybody needs to understand what everybody else is doing. I get our marketing guys. I get them in here and they follow my distillers around. I invite my distillers to the marketing meetings, and I build this culture um, very intentionally where we are all involved in everything. I don't have guys that are like, well, I just do this one thing. I find that that doesn't really help all. I have once a week, I get everybody and it's an open meeting. We call it Whiskey Wednesdays. So on Wednesdays, we get everybody together that wants to come. These are people from the marketing department, from our retail staff, from our sales team, from my production guys, all the way up, to the office folks. They are allowed to come in. We have a few drams, and we call it, they're sort of strategy sessions. And I let them ask questions, and I'll usually kind of talk about some topic that is pressing, but the idea is to kind of get everybody in the room together because no matter where you are in the organization, low or high, you all have really incredible ideas. I've had some of the best ideas that we've implemented as a team came from somebody just out of nowhere that I was like, I didn't even know you were thinking about. So we allow ourselves to be really open. And that's the thing that I've learned beyond like and so even when I hire people, and I'm going through a process right now where I have a guy that's leaving this week to go, he's running his own shop back in his hometown. And so I'm looking at hiring somebody and interviewing some folks. Uh, their skill set is less important to me because I can teach them the distilling skill set. I want to know how they're going to fit culturally. And for me, having that very inclusive, open culture in the company is by far the most important thing I've learned over the years to make a successful team. And honestly, you'll find the liquid gets better too because they genuinely give a shit about what they're doing.
That's exciting to hear. I mean, as a former marketing person myself, I like hearing your take on that and getting everybody involved in different processes. I always firmly believe that, to tell the story, you have to understand every aspect of the story, or if not, people are going to start noticing that you're blowing smoke.
Yep.
Um, So
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that. I went to a whiskey event last year with my good buddy John Foster, and we
Hmm.
went up, and of course the guy pouring it probably just a local ambassador, but we were asking simple questions about the brand and the spirit, and he had no idea how to
Yeah.
answer them, and
Yeah.
didn't seem to care, which was really disappointing.
No, that stuff's infuriating to me. I mean, the thing is like everybody's got one of these in their pocket now. If you're making something up, they'll figure it out pretty
Mhm.
quickly. Um, but we also, another thing that we talk about is sort of this idea of extreme transparency. If you, in the book, um, all of my whiskey recipes are in there. Um, I, everything like the SOPs, how we do our stuff, it's all in there. I do not care. If you came into our distillery and you said, well, I work for Beefeater and we want to know what your gin recipe is. First of all, I don't know why anybody from Beefeater would want to know that, but let's just say you did. My guys are instructed to tell you down to the smallest detail how to make our gin. Botanicals, everything. Cuts off the still, how we load it, how we because first of all, if you want to copy our recipe, you're the one that has to sleep at night, not me. So knock yourself out. But also, good luck on being able to repeat it. There's just too many variables in play. So I have no problem with being completely open with people. I let people come in here, other distillers, and I don't think of them like this, but some people refer to them as my competitors. That's not how I look at other folks in the industry. Uh, I have an open door policy with people. You let me know when you want to come by. I don't charge people for it. Come in, hang out with us. I will happily, you can follow my guys around for a few days. I'll answer questions. They'll tell you what they're doing. You can bounce ideas off of us. Um, we do all that. I don't, we kind of view ourselves as a teaching distillery. And I think just being open with folks in this day and age is unbelievably valuable. And you know what? It's a two-way street because usually when somebody asks me a question, I learn something too. I'm always getting these questions. And I'm like, oh, wow, I had never thought to phrase it in that way or think about it in that light. Um, I mean, it's really valuable for us to be able to do it as well. So, um, I mean, you have your right. If you want to be very secretive and have all these proprietary, that's your right. But just for us, it was just sort of the opposite direction that we wanted to go with it.
Nice. Uh, got a question here from an anonymous attendee. I'm going to brief it down because it's kind of long, but they ask a question about, given the current oversupply in the bulk whiskey market, they're curious how you see it impacting craft and regional distilleries. Um, and then, do you think that bulk market can absorb some of the glut, or does it create additional challenges? And more broadly, how should a newer distilleries be thinking about production in a market where there's already so much whiskey aging at a relatively low price?
This is a good one, and this is something I talk about a lot with folks these days. Um, the market, so I was at the Beam conference, and it was interesting. You had these different perspectives in the opening talk about where the market was. You had Fred No from Jim Beam up there. You had Andrea Wilson from Michter's and Kaveh Zamarian from Rabbit Hole up there. And one of the first questions that got asked to the opening panel was, is this a correction or is this a decline in the market? And Fred No was like, it's a decline, no doubt. Everybody else was a bit more measured. I would argue that first of all, we tend to think in like very black and white terms about this stuff. It's either a decline or it's a correction. Well, it's either cyclical or it's structural. Um, it can actually be all of these things and more at the same time. We have this tendency as human beings to try to simplify things as much as possible, but the truth is uh, the situation is far more complicated than anybody wants to admit. But I honestly think this is probably one of the most exciting times for the smaller craft regional distilleries to be around. Um, The overall whiskey industry in the United States right now is effectively flat, which you wouldn't know that from reading all the articles that come out. Um, you're hearing, Jim Beam's numbers are down and Jack Daniel's numbers are down and so on and so forth. Um, and to be clear, I like the whiskeys from those companies. So this is not like any kind of indictment on them at all. But a lot of these guys did overproduce, and the idea was, seemingly there just wasn't there wasn't in my mind there wasn't a really great conversation between the C-suite folks and the production people. And this is sort of like the organism is almost too big at this point. So what you have is, they were kind of like, oh, well, we're gonna make all this whiskey. Whiskey's really hot right now. We're gonna okay, but the market's never gonna support all these companies doing it. It was never gonna be that big, not that quickly. And so what we have is we have a situation where the big guys basically got in, like, I'm going to make as much as possible, and then I'll outproduce the other guy and I'll outmarket him. And then on the shelf, it just becomes a bare knuckle boxing match for space and for consumer attention. Okay, well, that doesn't ever work. All right. There's no real strategy there. On top of that, you have tons of, the marketing initiatives are, they're not that authentic anymore. I mean, I've heard from like marketing consultants, like, you need to be authentic. I actually had a marketing consultant that was pitching us a deck a couple of weeks ago and was talking about the need for us to be authentic. And then they got up and showed us a couple of AI generated videos. And I was like, you've got to be shitting me. Like, and I mean, I before they'd even done that, I'd already kind of decided that we weren't going to go with them anyway. But the thing is that that type of thing happens all the time. And then there's also this self-fulfilling prophecy that happens where the accounting departments are seeing the numbers go down, and they're like, you know what? It's just not financially feasible. We're going to pull marketing from these products because it's just not doing anything. So they start to pull marketing dollars, and then what happens? The numbers continue to go down, right? And so the other part of it is that you have all these external factors, and like I said, it's complicated. But you have a lot of these C-suite guys that come out and they're like, look, Gen Z isn't drinking. THC is coming from us. Ozempic is causing problems. Blah, blah, blah. Tariffs and supply chain disruptions and yada, yada, yada. Okay. Most of the guys that are saying this are running publicly traded companies. All right. They answer to shareholders. And those are all external factors. Ozempic is changing the way people drink. It's not changing. It's really, in my opinion, it's not really affecting the dollar lines or anything. Gen Z is drinking. One of my favorite lines is people are, they keep screaming like, oh, half of Gen Z isn't drinking. I'm like, well, yeah, 50% of Gen Z isn't old enough to drink. So yeah, you're technically right. Yeah. Half of Gen Z isn't drinking. You're right. Also, most of them can't afford to buy a house or a car or have kids. Once they have those three stressors in their life, believe me, they'll pick up the fucking bottle. So I'm not worried about Gen Z. They're actually most of the data actually suggests they're drinking about as much as any other generation has at this point in their consumer cycle. So I don't care about that. The point is that all these guys come out, and these are all external factors. These are all things that you have no power over. All right. But you can control things internally. You can control your culture, and you can control how you deal with the customer. I tell my guys, I'm like, don't treat the customer like a customer. Treat them like they're guests here. That's how I want people to interact. We do not, I've actually told my guys, I'm like, you are not allowed to sell to people, because as soon as you try to sell something to somebody, it becomes transaction. All right. You try to sell something to me, and even though we won't say anything, we won't acknowledge it, in the back of my head, there's this little voice that's telling me the only reason that Brandon's being nice to me right now is because he's trying to get
Yeah.
some money out of my pocket. All right. It becomes transactional. All I care about is somebody coming into my distillery or somebody picking up my book or whatever it is that I'm involved with and them enjoying it. And if they don't buy the book, if they don't buy a bottle from me, that's fine. Did they have a good time? That's what I care about. That's what I genuinely care about. And so I think this is sort of the superpower, getting back to the question at hand. This is sort of the superpower that these distilleries have. What we're seeing in at the ground level is that you're seeing these small or regional players. These are the ones that people are getting excited about. These are the distilleries that are starting to move product. You say, well, Nielsen says this, Nielsen channel says that. The Nielsen channel doesn't cover as much as people think it does. At most, it covers 70% of the sales channels. At most. And actually, I think a that's a lot more than what it actually is. I think that's giving it a lot too much credit. Um, so I think it's really exciting that people are, just as a lot of people are paying attention to, where their food comes from and, where their money's going and who they're supporting. I think that culturally we are seeing a little bit of a shift. And I don't need, when Jim Beam is, down 4 or 5%, I don't need even but a fraction of one of that percent for me to become successful. I just need to shave off a sliver of those, those people, uh, and get them excited about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you say that because I did a webinar with Scott Schiller from Thoroughbred
Yep.
Spirits back in December, and he and I have had discussions about this, and I've been saying it for a while because I like craft beer, craft spirits, uh, you know, and he pointed out, he said all the things you're seeing in the news about the big boys, like that's not you. as a,
No, it's not.
as a craft spirit, like you're in different ballparks, you're in different countries. Like
Hmm.
focus on what you can control and how can we make the best of that. And I think I'm 42. I've got two young kids. You know, inflation's definitely hitting us all in the pocketbook. But I think as craft producers, as you mentioned, young people might not be drinking as much or drinking as much, but I think they're more conscious about what they're putting in their body. And as a craft producer, if you can tell that story about, we might be a little bit more, but here's why.
Hmm.
We're just a better tasting, better spirit. And, you're not drinking to get drunk anymore. You're drinking to enjoy it with friends. You're having a couple glasses. You're calling it a night. Um, I think for a lot of craft spirits brands, it's an opportune time to pounce, especially with your local market and building a good on-site facility and making it where people want to come hang out,
Yeah.
not just come to a tasting and leave, but a place they want to come to regularly. I think is great for craft distilleries, and yeah, cut out the noise of the big boys and focus on what you're doing. Like you said, a sliver of what they're dealing with is largely successful for you and other small distilleries.
Exactly.
So
I don't sweat what the big guys are doing. I pay attention to what they're doing. If nothing else, because I think that a lot of them can offer a really, really good case studies in what not to do at this point.
well put. Uh, Nick Sadowski asks, "What temp does your three-chamber run at, and what flavors do you think the higher temps bring out? If you are bringing
That's
more oils over, do you need to worry about louching at all with those distillates?"
so that's a good one. So it boils the bottom chamber. So all the chambers boil at different temperatures. The bottom chamber boils at about 220 degrees. Um, and what is effectively happening is that we're ripping a lot of oils, we're ripping a lot of fatty acids out. Um, you're getting um, you're getting a ton of like really rich kind of chocolatey notes. You also get a lot of floral notes as well, particularly from rye. Beta-denacenone is one of those compounds that a lot of distillers chase after, and it's a very difficult compound to get because it tends to come over pretty deep in the tails. In a chamber still, it comes over very, very easily. So yeah, it's a, it's definitely an oil extracting machine, but, it's, yeah, I mean, our oldest three chamber distillate just passed 18 months now. And I think I think our flagship that we launch in the fall, it's looking like it's going to be a blend of three chamber and pot still. We'll release some three chamber stuff on its own as well, but it's looking like it's going to be a blend of the two, and it just adds all this oiliness and heft. Now, with regards to the question of whether or not it douches, yeah, it probably will haze up a little bit if we drop it too low. The plan is to not release anything with three chamber in it below 100 proof, so that that's likely what's going to happen.
Uh, Nathan asked, we are looking to start producing rye whiskey this year. What advice do you have for what could be a problematic situation with mash and fermentation getting stuck and foaming?
Rye is one of those that I think a lot of distillers get really nervous about, and I can understand why. It is a lower yielding grain for a lot of people. You don't get as much alcohol out of it. It does get very sticky. One of the best things you can do is use a bit more water and less grain in the mash, so make a thinner mash. Um, you're not going to get as much alcohol out of it that way, obviously, but you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. Um, so that's what I kind of recommend to people. We don't, we personally do not cook our rye at too high of a temperature. Our our raw unmalted rye, we cook at maybe 175, 180 degrees for like 20 minutes. Not very long. I know some people even go lower than that. And the idea for us is that we're trying to retain as much of the aromatics out of that grain as possible. I mean, we're using like all heirlooms. So, and we're spending a large amount of money on them. So I'm not going to get rid of all that stuff. So that's part of it. Also just, get yourself like a really nice beta glucanase and xylanase enzyme blend. I use a product from Novozymes called Viscofirm. But there's tons of other ones out there too. So, you know, they don't, I don't, I'm not sponsored by anybody. They don't pay me to say that. That's just the product that I happen to use. But yeah, there's several others out there that work really well. But that'll help quite a bit. I would say don't use just a beta glucanase. I would use a xylanase as well. Because that is arabinoxylans are the other part of the gum equation with rye, and there's not a great way to test for them in the grain. So a lot of times you don't know how much is in there, and it can really cause you problems if you're just using beta glucanase. And you just happen to wind up with a patch of grain that has a lot of xylans.
Uh, Russ asked, I was going to ask about the Ma
Monongahela.
Monongahela
Don't worry,
rye.
it's a PA thing, baby.
I
It's a PA
appreciate
thing.
that. He's asking, he's Southwestern PA distilling hobbyist. Is there a specific rye mash that makes a true rye?
That's up for some hot debate right now. Right now, there's a small group of us, a small contingent of PA distillers that are trying to define through the PA Distillers Guild what Monongahela rye actually is. Um, and so there's a lot of stuff we've been kind of chasing back and forth. Uh, what we landed on pretty quickly, though, was at least with regards to the mash bill, Monongahela can have pretty much anything in it except for corn. There was historically, you did not see corn in Monongahela rye. Most of the mash bills back then had usually about 80% rye and 20% malted barley, give or take. Um, we have kind of an odd one that we pulled from an old distillery, the old Thomas More distillery, not the Thomas More that Sazerac owns. There was a Kentucky Thomas More, but there was also a Pennsylvania Thomas More. They were both distillers. Um, and from the old Thomas More distillery near McKeesport, PA, and he used reportedly, a 50-50 all rye mash bill, which meant it was 50% malted, 50% unmalted rye. So that's actually what we use. So it's technically 100% rye. It's just half of it is malted. Um, but yeah, I would say most of those mash bills. Now Liberty Pole uses a small amount of wheat. I think 13% wheat in theirs. Um, so theirs is a bit of like a really old style. Like pre Civil War era Monongahela. But yeah, what we did not see was corn.
Nice. Uh, Real quick, Mike, a content creator, asked what product by Iron City would you recommend for a review that reflects your product?
Oh gosh.
And then I've got one more
Um,
question for you to wrap this up.
Fair enough. Man, that's a good question. So I'm really bad about talking about my own stuff. I'm like, you sure you don't want to talk about somebody else's stuff? Because that would be way
What do you say,
easier
like,
for me.
if you had someone you really cared about, what would be that? What would you give them to say this best represents what I'm doing?
Some stuff from Liberty Pole. No, it's hard. So actually, we do have whiskey on the shelf right now, and it is whiskey that I made. It's just whiskey that I made at one of my old distilleries. We weren't going to source anything. That was sort of the thing. The owner didn't want to source anything, but one of my older distilleries, some barrels came up for sale, and it was funny because like I remember like I saw the barrels, it's like my handwriting's all over them, like oh yeah, I remember this barrel, and so I still made it. I just didn't make it here. The thing is that those whiskeys were from a different project years ago. The brief for the project was very different. I thought about whiskey very differently back then. So I mean, it's good whiskey. I have not entered it into competition, but I know other people that did buy some of the barrels did, and they did very well with it. So, I mean, it's whiskey that I'm proud of. It's just not representative of what we're doing here. It was more, the styles were more modern in their approach. The techniques were more modern. Here, we're trying to do something that is a bit more, well, old school by definition. And so, yeah, I would say let me come back to that in like 6 months. That's a terrible answer, I mean.
We'll mark the calendar to come back and
Yeah.
and revisit it. Hey, and you know what? We'll readdress it in Miami.
There you go. I like that. Yeah.
Come down
Yeah.
to Miami and Matt will give you the answer.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to not sweat and die of sunstroke. So, yeah.
Liz Rhodes just said, "Great chat, Matt. Congrats on the book."
Oh, thank you.
My question to finish it out. Uh, you know, we got sidetracked, I think, with a little bit off the book talking, but it's a new book, so everyone, like I
Actually, all
said,
the stuff I talked about is actually
yeah,
in
you
there.
covered in there.
I
So
talk about a lot of that stuff. So,
there we go. Um, what's one thing you learned that surprised you during the course of working on this book?
oh, all sorts of things. I had to kind of learn the three chamber almost in real time. Um, and so this was something that was a nice. I was very proud and honored to be able to do this. The book has the first SOP on how to run a three-chamber still written in over 100 years. Um, So I'm quite proud to be able to put that in there and actually how to run it. Believe me, the learning curve was fairly steep, trying to figure out how to properly run that bastard. Um, but then also just, tons of other things. I mean, one of the reasons I like working on these kinds of projects is that you go into it and you're like, all right, I have this idea for a book. I think I know enough about whatever the topic is that I can write the book. This happened with my first two books too. You go into it thinking you know enough, and then you quickly realize, no, you don't. And so you are, I found myself just like, one thing that I was told very early on in my life was that, the measure of how well you know something is how well you can teach it. And so if you can't teach it, then you probably don't know it. So my line of thinking was, well, if I can write a book on it, that means I know it really, really well. And I'm gonna write this book come hell or high water. Um, so at the end of all this, do I think I know whiskey really, really well? No. But at the same time, I say that in like the most um loving and curious way possible about the category because I think that you have to be constantly striving to learn more. Um, and and if you're not, I mean, I've met far too many folks in the business that and I won't name any names, but that clearly they feel like they know everything and there's nothing new, what's the point? They don't need to learn or anything else. And I am like, no, there's just too many things out there I want to know. So yeah, I mean that is, and I'm still diving into it. I mean, it's this. I mean, Iron City has become sort of this research and teaching playground for us, and it's just something that like me and my guys are just constantly learning new things all the time. We're getting involved with different relationships with different universities and research partners just because we're curious. I mean, so I mean, yeah, I mean whether or not you pick up the book or not, I mean, I think as long as you just enjoy being curious, you're gonna continue to thrive on this business.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I mean, thank you so much for jumping on me, and I'm glad that everything we've discussed is also in your new book, Whiskey Grain to Glass. I look forward to getting up and seeing your place sometime. Wink, wink.
Yeah, yeah.
When it happens. Um, Everyone, thanks for joining. Sorry again for the link issue. Really hate that. We will do better next time, I promise. If not, technology just hates me.
I will
So,
make one final plea to anybody that picks up the book. Except I hope you enjoy it. But this is something Eric would probably want me to say. One final plea. If you buy the book and you enjoy it, leave a review in Amazon because it actually helps other people find the book. Uh, it's like it takes just a minute. If you hate it, then my name was Fred No, and I don't want to say that. He's a really nice guy, so like I actually really like him. But anyway, yeah, that's something Eric would probably want me to say is leave a review if you enjoy it.
yes,
Or even
please.
if you don't enjoy it, you can bash me all you want. It's fine.
Yeah, please leave. I put a link to the book on Amazon in the chat. I also put a link to our resources books on there. So if you're looking for more books, we have them all on our website. Uh, Again, looking at the polls, I had 23 people who said they are not members of ADI. So, please join. If you do not know, as of mid-January, we launched a free member category.
Hmm.
So you can become a general member, gives you basic access to ADI, all of our resources, also gets you the discount to the conference coming up in Miami, August 18th and 19th, which is a great 2-day conference of educational sessions, a great show floor, probably the largest in the craft spirits industry.
Yep,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Had a lot of people I asked them if they were coming to Miami Beach, and 34 of 43 said no. I can't read why that is. I'm going to guess it's probably financial. But please understand that we will launch registration next month. We have an early bird rate. As a member, you get a discount as well. And Anne Sophie, who is our conference director wizard, is working with local hotels. All of our hotels are going to be under $200 a night, right down there in Miami Beach, which is really awesome. So we're fighting to make it affordable. So it's a good investment in your network and in coming and learning from people like Matt and many
I will be
others.
there.
Well, huh?
I will be there.
Yeah.
I'm
We're
giving a
gonna
talk. I don't remember what I'm talking about.
We'll have that schedule out shortly.
That's
But yeah,
good
so
because I don't remember.
registration will open up next month, so you can take advantage of that early bird registration. Show floor is filling up. We've already got 60 booths to place, and we haven't even really opened it up and advertised it yet. So it'll be another great show as well. You can come and find yeast suppliers, glass, everything you need. So again, for all those who aren't members, please go online. I shared the join link in the chat. Become a member of ADI. Help us grow this community, get access, and anything you guys need. We're here, and you can come down and meet Matt in person and have him sign your book. So, Matt, thank you again so much. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, I apologize. This will be on YouTube and probably by the end of the week. It depends on our schedule, but we'll get this up on YouTube as well, so you can go back and watch it.
Cool.
Matt, thank you again, man. Have a great week up there. Keep learning and keep rocking it. Okay.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys. Have a great week.